This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. My name is Mike Thompson. I'm 45 years old, a father of 4 daughters, a husband, or at least I was, and a man who thought he had life figured out until it all came crashing down. I grew up in a small town, met my high school sweetheart Rachel at 14, and built a family that felt like something out of a dream. I'm not a perfect guy. I've got my flaws, my temper, my tendency to trust too much, but I loved my family more than anything. I worked hard, first at a factory to support Rachel through college, then climbing the ladder at a tech firm. My girls, Lauren, Madison, Olivia, and Ashley, were my world. I thought I knew what betrayal looked like, but I never saw it coming from my own brother James. Not until 6 years ago, when I walked into my own living room and saw my life unravel in a way I'll never forget. It was a cold November evening, 6 years back, and I'd just flown in from a week-long business trip on the West Coast. My suitcase wheels rattled against the hardwood floor as I stepped into the house, expecting the usual chaos of my girls fighting over the remote or Rachel calling out about dinner. Instead, the air hit me like a wall, thick, heavy, wrong. Rachel stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, her green eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen. My daughters were scattered around her like broken pieces of a puzzle. Lauren, 18 then, gripping the armrest of the couch so hard her knuckles were white. Madison, 16, sobbing silently into her hands. Olivia, 15, staring at the floor. And Ashley, just 12, clinging to Rachel's side, her face streaked with tears. And there, in the middle of it all, was James, my younger brother, holding a folder like it was a loaded gun. "How could you do this to us?" Rachel's voice cracked, sharp as a whip. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest, confusion flooding me. What are you talking about?" I stammered, dropping my bag. Before I could process her words, James stepped forward, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. He flipped open the folder and shoved it toward me. Photos spilled out, grainy shots of me walking into a hotel with a woman I didn't recognize, her arm looped through mine. Text messages printed out in black and white, full of intimate words I'd never written. Hotel receipts with my name on them. My stomach dropped, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. "This is bullshit," I said, my voice shaking as I snatched the papers from him. "Rachel, you know me. This isn't real." But she didn't move, didn't soften. Her glare cut through me, and I saw something worse than anger. Disbelief, betrayal, disgust. James spoke up, his tone calm, almost rehearsed. "She came to me, Mike. Your coworker, Lila. She felt guilty, told me everything. How long were you going to keep this up?" I turned to him, my fists clenching. "Lila? I barely know her. James, what the hell are you doing?" But it was too late. The room erupted. Lauren stood up, her voice trembling with rage. "I trusted you, Dad. I thought you were better than this." She reached into her pocket, pulled out her house key, and threw it at me. It hit my chest and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in my skull. Madison's sobs grew louder, and through them I heard her whisper, "I hate you." Olivia wouldn't even look at me. She just hugged her knees, her shoulders shaking. Ashley's small voice broke me most of all. "Why did Daddy do this to us, Mommy?" Rachel didn't answer her, just pulled her closer. I tried to fight back, to explain. "This is fake. I've been at work. Rachel, you know where I was. I called you every night." But James had already poisoned the well. He'd spent weeks, I'd learn later, dropping hints to Rachel about my strange behavior, planting doubts in my girls' minds. My parents, Robert and Pamela, were there too, summoned by James for this ambush. My dad, the man who'd taught me how to be a husband and father, stepped forward, his face twisted with contempt. "No son of mine would do this to his family," he said, his voice low and final. "If you've got any dignity left, you'll end this divorce quick and clean." Pamela just stood behind him, tears in her eyes, shaking her head. I looked around at the faces I loved most in the world, and all I saw was hate. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. I grabbed my bag, my throat tight, and walked out into the night. The door slammed behind me and the silence that followed was deafening. That was the moment my life shattered, and I didn't even know why. The next few weeks were a blur of desperation. I checked into a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying fly and carpets stained with God knows what. The room smelled of stale smoke and regret, but it was all I could afford after Rachel froze our joint accounts. I sat on the sagging bed, my suitcase open beside me, staring at the crumpled photos James had waved in my face. My hands shook as I traced the outlines of that woman I didn't know. Her arm looped through mine like we were lovers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's furious glare, Lauren's key hitting my chest, Madison's choked, "I hate you." My chest felt like it was caving in, but I couldn't let it. I had to prove this was a lie. I spent every dime I had hiring private investigators, burning through my savings like it was kindling. The first was Tom, a grizzled ex-cop with a gravelly voice and a limp he wouldn't explain. I met him in a diner 2 days after I'd been kicked out, sliding the folder across a sticky table. He flipped through it, his gray eyes narrowing. "Something's off," he muttered, tapping a photo with a thick finger. "Shadows don't line up right. Could be doctored." Hope flickered in me, fragile as a candle in the wind. "Can you find her?" I asked, leaning forward. "This Lila woman?" he grunted, sipping his coffee. "I'll try, but if she's gone, she's gone." He tracked leads for a week, called me once from a payphone, voice low. "She's supposedly moved to Oregon, no forwarding address. Weird for a coworker to vanish like that." Then he hit a dead end. "Sorry, Mike," he said, dropping the folder back in my lap. "Can't chase ghosts." I paid him the last of my cash, my stomach twisting as he walked away. The second was Claire, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who chain-smoked Camels and talked like she'd seen it all. I found her through a classified ad, meeting her in her cluttered office downtown. She spread the hotel receipts across her desk, peering at them through bifocals. "These dates match your trip," she said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "But the signatures? They're close, not perfect. Could be forged." My pulse quickened. "So they're fake?" I asked, gripping the chair arms. She shrugged. "Can't prove it yet. Need the originals, not copies." She dug into the hotel records, even sweet-talked a clerk into pulling security footage, but it was wiped. Conveniently, she noted with a frown. After 10 days, she called it quits. "Someone's covering tracks," she told me, stubbing out her cigarette. "I'm out of moves." I left her office feeling like I'd been punched, the hope slipping through my fingers. Then came Jake, the third, a young hotshot in his late 20s, all bravado and gelled hair, who swore he could crack anything. I met him at a bar, desperation making me reckless. "Give me a week," he said, smirking as he took the folder. "I'll blow this wide open." He moved fast, too fast maybe. 4 days in, he called me at midnight, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Mike, I found something. Your brother's dirty, man. He's got—" A muffled shout cut him off, then the line went dead. I redialed over and over, my heart hammering, but it went straight to voicemail. The next morning, an email pinged in. "Sorry, Mike, case is off. Don't contact me." I slammed my laptop shut, rage boiling up. Years later, I'd learned James had tracked Jake down, cornered him outside his apartment, and threatened to hurt his wife and toddler son if he didn't back off. But back then, I had nothing, just a dead phone and a growing dread. With no leads and no money, I was drowning. Rachel pushed the divorce through in a month, a brutal, one-sided affair handled by lawyers I couldn't afford to fight. She wouldn't see me, wouldn't talk, just sent papers demanding full custody, the house, everything. My girls cut me off completely, blocked my number, my Facebook, my emails. I'd send texts anyway, late at night, stupid things like, "I love you, Lauren," or "I'm sorry, Ashley," knowing they'd never read them. The silence was worse than the yelling had been. Then the job went too. James had been busy at the tech firm we both worked at, spreading whispers that I'd been inappropriate with coworkers, that I'd crossed lines. Clients started pulling away, refusing to deal with me. My boss, a guy named Carl who'd once clapped me on the back at company picnics, called me into his office. "Mike, I hate this," he said, not meeting my eyes. "But the optics are bad. We're letting you go." I walked out with a cardboard box, my pride in shreds. I moved into a tiny apartment across town, the walls so thin I could hear the couple next door screaming at each other every night. The isolation clawed at me. I'd sit in my car outside our old house sometimes, parked a block away so Rachel wouldn't call the cops. I'd see Madison through the window, sketching at the kitchen table, her hair falling over her face like it always did when she was lost in her art. Or Olivia, kicking a soccer ball in the yard, her movements sharp and angry. Once I saw Ashley at the mailbox, her head down, and I almost got out, almost ran to her, but the restraining order stopped me cold. I'd drive away, tears blurring the road, hating myself for not fighting harder. That's when I met Max. It was a month after the divorce finalized, and I was at rock bottom. I wandered into a shelter on a whim, thinking maybe a pet would keep me sane. He was a scruffy tabby with a bent ear and a meow like a rusty hinge, ignored by everyone else. The worker said he'd been dumped, left in a box on the roadside. "He's a fighter," she told me, and I saw myself in him. Beat up, unwanted, still clawing to survive. I took him home and he'd curl up next to me on the lumpy couch, purring while I stared at the ceiling. Some nights, he was the only thing keeping me from the bottle, or worse. Work became my lifeline. I landed a gig at a smaller tech firm across the city, a place that didn't know my past. I threw myself into it, working late, taking extra projects, anything to fill the void. 2 promotions came in 3 years, but they felt empty. I'd come home to Max, crack open a beer, and sit in the dark, the silence mocking me. My coworkers were friendly enough, but I kept them at arm's length. "Got kids?" they'd ask over lunch, and I'd mumble something vague, shove food in my mouth to avoid answering. Dating was a joke, too. I tried a few times, met a woman named Julia at a bar once, a nurse with kind eyes. "Tell me about your family," she said, smiling over her wine. I froze, my throat closing up. "It's complicated," I managed, and she didn't push. But there was no second date. How do you explain that your kids think you're a monster, that your brother stole your life? Holidays were torture. Thanksgiving was a TV dinner in front of a football game I didn't care about. Christmas, I'd dig out old home videos, Lauren riding her bike, Madison painting, Olivia scoring goals, Ashley giggling as we built her computer, and drink until I passed out. Their birthdays were the worst. I'd buy gifts anyway, books for Lauren, art supplies for Madison, soccer gear for Olivia, tech gadgets for Ashley, and stash them in a storage unit downtown. The pile grew year after year, a shrine to the family I'd lost. Then, 6 years in, everything shifted. It was December 2024, a cold night with snow dusting the windowsill. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but Max nudged my hand, like he knew something I didn't. I picked up, and my mom's voice hit me like a punch. "Mike, it's me," Pamela said, choking on sobs. "We know the truth about James. Please, come meet us." My heart thudded, a mix of anger and exhaustion washing over me. "What truth?" I snapped, my grip tightening on the phone. "He lied, Mike," she whispered. "About everything. Rachel found proof." I didn't say anything, just hung up, my mind racing. 6 years of hell, and now this? I wasn't ready to face them, not yet, but I needed answers. I called a lawyer the next morning, David Hart, a guy I'd found online who handled defamation cases. He met me at his office, a sleek space with a view of the city skyline. "Lay it out," he said, leaning back in his chair, his gray suit crisp against the leather. I told him everything. The ambush, the fake evidence, the divorce, Mom's call. He listened, jotting notes, then looked up. "If they've got proof, we can nail him. Criminal and civil. You in?" I nodded, my jaw tight. "I want him to pay." Rachel called an hour later, her voice shaky but urgent. "Mike, I found emails," she said. "James, he planned it all, years ago. I'm sending them now." My phone pinged, and I opened the files with David. There it was. Emails to a photo editor named Greg, payments for fake receipts, a journal detailing his obsession with Rachel since high school. "I'll destroy him slow," he'd written. "She'll see me when he's nothing." I felt bile rise in my throat, my hands trembling with fury. David grinned, a predator's smile. "This is a slam dunk. We file tomorrow." That's when I met Sarah Klein, a private detective Rachel had hired after her discovery. She showed up at my apartment that night, a wiry woman with a scar on her cheek and eyes that saw through bullshit. "Your brother's a sociopath," she said, tossing a stack of unedited photos on my table. "I've seen liars before. My ex was one. But this? Next level." She'd already dug into James's life, found a name, Ethan, his college buddy. "He's the fixer," she said. "Booked the rooms, hired the girl. I can break him." We tracked Ethan down the next day, cornering him at a dive bar. He was a mess, sweaty, unshaven, his hands shaking as he nursed a beer. "I didn't want this," he muttered, staring at the table. "James said it was a joke, then he got crazy. Threatened my wife, my kid." I leaned in, my voice low and hard. "You ruined my life, Ethan. Give me everything or you're done." He caved, spilling names, Greg the editor, a clerk named Tina who'd faked the receipts, and handed over a burner phone James had given him. Sarah and I hit James's office that night, sneaking in with a warrant she'd pulled strings to get. The place was chaos, files everywhere, a laptop humming. We cracked it, and my world tilted. Videos of Rachel filmed through hidden cameras in our old house, her cooking, sleeping, laughing with the girls. A list of blackmail targets, including a kid named Ben from Ashley's school, paid to lie about me. And the journal, pages of his sick fantasy, plotting my ruin since before I married Rachel. "He's hers until I take him apart," he wrote. I sank into his chair, my breath ragged, rage and grief warring inside me. Sarah gripped my shoulder. "We've got him, Mike, but there's more." She pulled up an email from someone new, Lila, the coworker James had pinned it all on. "She's real," Sarah said, "and she's scared, wants to talk." My heart raced. The woman who'd haunted me for 6 years was about to step out of the shadows. Sarah and I sat in James's office, the glow of his laptop casting shadows across the room. My breath came in shallow bursts as I stared at the videos. Rachel cooking dinner, laughing with the girls, unaware she was being watched. The blackmail list burned into my mind. Ben, a kid from Ashley's school, paid $50 to lie about me. Tina, a hotel clerk, coerced with threats to her job. And that journal, page after page of James's twisted obsession, his handwriting jagged like a knife. "He's hers until I take him apart," he'd written, dated before I even proposed to Rachel. I felt like I was choking, rage and nausea swirling in my gut. Sarah's hand on my shoulder was the only thing anchoring me. "We've got him, Mike," she said, her voice steady. "But there's more. Lila's reaching out." My head snapped up. "She's real?" Sarah nodded, pulling up an email. "And she's terrified. Wants to meet." We drove to a diner an hour later, the snow falling thicker now, coating the windshield in white. Lila was waiting in a corner booth, a thin woman in her 30s, blonde hair pulled back, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. She looked up as we slid in across from her, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "James, he forced me. Said he'd get my son taken away if I didn't play along." I leaned forward, my fists clenched under the table. "Play along how?" She swallowed hard, tears welling up. "He paid me to pose for those photos. Business meetings you were at, Mike. He edited them later. Gave me scripts for what to say if anyone asked. I'm so sorry." Her words hit me like a slap, but the anger wasn't for her. It was for him. "Why now?" I asked, my voice rough. She slid a USB drive across the table. Recordings. Him telling me what to do. I kept them, just in case. Sarah snatched it, her jaw tightening. "This ends him," she said. The next day, Ethan cracked wide open. Sarah hauled him to her office, a cramped space littered with coffee cups and case files, and played Lila's recordings. His face went white as James's voice filled the room. "You'll do it, Lila, or your kid's gone." Ethan slumped in his chair, running a hand through his greasy hair. Okay, he muttered. "I'll give you everything. Greg the editor, Tina the clerk, a guy named Vince who set up the cameras. James ran it like a damn operation." I stood behind Sarah, my arms crossed, staring him down. "Why'd you help him?" I demanded. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Money at first, then fear. He's unhinged, Mike. Said he'd frame me for worse if I bailed." Sarah smirked. "You're testifying. Deal?" He nodded, defeated. The police moved fast after that. Rachel handed over James's laptop, the emails, the journal, everything she'd found after his drunken slip. "I didn't design this just to lose her," he'd yelled at her, and that one line unraveled his whole web. Detectives raided his house, found USB drives with backups of his fake evidence, burner phones, even a list of future targets, co-workers' families he planned to ruin if I ever got close to the truth. My mom showed up at my apartment that night, her face pale, a thick folder in her hands. "We found these in his old room," she said, her voice trembling. Unedited photos, bank statements showing payments to Greg and Vince, emails plotting my downfall. I took the folder, my chest tight. "Why didn't you believe me?" I asked, the hurt spilling out. She broke down, sobbing. "We trusted him, Mike. We're so sorry." I didn't hug her. Couldn't. The wound was too raw. My girls started reaching out one by one. Lauren called first, her voice thick with tears. "Dad, I saw the evidence," she said. "He played us all. I'm a lawyer now. I should have questioned it." Madison texted me photos of her paintings, stored in a unit James had rented to keep her dependent on him. "He stole my work," she wrote. "I hate him." Olivia sent a video, tapes of James bribing her soccer coach to bench her during games I might have seen. Ashley's call broke me most. "He ruined our coding project," she said, crying. "Paid someone to hack it. I thought you gave up on me. I gripped the phone, tears streaming down my face. Never, Ash. Never. James was arrested 2 days later, caught at the office trying to wipe his computer. An employee overheard him on a call, deleted all now, and tipped off security. The IT department locked everything down before he could touch it. As they cuffed him, he smirked, muttering, "She was supposed to be mine." I wasn't there, Sarah told me later, but that smugness fueled my fire. The grand jury indicted him in hours, the evidence overwhelming. The prosecutor, a woman named Ellen with 20 years on the job, called it planned hatred like I've never seen. I sat in David's office as he prepped the civil suit, my hands steady for the first time in years. "He's looking at 15 years minimum," David said. "Millions in damages. You're getting your life back." The trial was a circus. James pleaded guilty, shocking everyone, but demanded to speak. Against his lawyer's pleas, he stood up, grinning like a madman, and talked for 45 minutes. "It was my masterpiece," he said, his voice dripping with pride. "Every detail, every lie, I built it perfect. Mike didn't deserve her, I did." He bragged about the cameras, the blackmail, the other families he'd targeted, 3 more across state lines, plus a consulting gig teaching creeps how to ruin lives. My stomach churned as he laughed. No remorse, just sick glee. The judge, a stern woman named Harris, slammed her gavel, her face red. "Your pride seals your fate," she snapped. 25 years, no parole for 18, consecutive, not concurrent. She tacked on $12 million in damages, pulled from the $20 million he'd stashed from embezzling and his twisted side hustle. Interpol took over the international angle, and the FBI dug into his interstate crimes. Rachel found his basement lair after the verdict, a hidden room with monitors, military-grade surveillance gear, footage of us all. He'd bugged my old apartment, my car, even the office. Ashley cracked his encrypted files, uncovering plans to target my coworkers' families next. Lauren helped prosecute his other victims' cases. Madison exposed his accomplices through her art. Olivia worked with the NTA to stop sports manipulation, and my parents started a support group for families hit by liars like him. But I couldn't go back. They begged me to reconcile, Rachel crying at my door, my girls sending letters. But 6 years gone isn't 6 days. I'd missed too much, hurt too deep. James rots in a cell now. His empire of lies collapsed, his smugness replaced by the slow grind of prison. I heard he rants to the guards, still claiming Rachel was his. Good. Let him suffer, trapped with his delusions. Me, I'm still here, Max purring beside me in this quiet apartment. I've turned down interviews, kept my name out of the headlines, but I'm working with Ashley and some cyber folks on tools to spot manipulators like him, patterns, red flags, tech to protect families. James's law is in the works too, tougher penalties for this kind of evil. It's not closure, the scars don't fade, but it's purpose. What I've learned? Trust is fragile, and monsters don't always look the part. James was my brother, my blood, and he tore me apart because he could. If you've got a story like this, a shadow in your life, don't wait 6 years. Speak up, fight back, dig for the truth. Share it with someone, anyone. Maybe it'll save you what I lost. I'm moving forward, one step at a time, but I'll never stop watching for the next James. Neither should you.